The sun dipped low over Maple Grove, casting a golden glow on the quiet suburban streets. At first glance, the neighborhood was a postcard of serenity, rows of pastel-colored houses, each framed by perfectly trimmed hedges and driveways that gleamed under the fading light. Yet, beneath the surface of this idyllic enclave, the threads of tension lay dormant, waiting for the right moment to unravel. At the edge of Sycamore Lane, the Johnsons' backyard had transformed into a lively hub of celebration. Laughter mingled with the hum of upbeat music as friends and family gathered to honor Zoe Johnson, a bright and ambitious 18-year-old whose recent achievements, valedictorian, National Honor Society, and a Harvard acceptance, had become the pride of her parents, Michael and Tanya. Zoe's smile was radiant, though a flicker of nervous energy danced in her eyes. The weight of expectations and the unknown future ahead seemed to hover just behind her excitement. Across the street, Patricia Whitman stood in the shadows of her living room, her gaze fixed on the gathering. The cheerful scene outside was a stark contrast to the silence that enveloped her home. A widow of 10 years, Patricia wore a role as neighborhood watch captain like armor, her sense of duty often spilling into a rigid need for control. Tonight, the sight of unfamiliar faces, voices and laughter she couldn't place, stirred unease within her, though she couldn't articulate why. Meanwhile, other neighbors joined the festivities, their presence adding layers to the evening's tapestry. The Rodriguezes arrived with a dessert in hand, their son Miguel exchanging a shy smile with Zoe as he handed her a gift. Officer Sarah Chin, returning from a grueling shift, paused at her driveway, momentarily captivated by the warmth radiating from the gathering. Yet, as the celebration swelled, so too did Patricia's discomfort. Her fingers hovered over her phone, a decision forming that would ripple far beyond her intentions. In the glow of the setting sun, the seeds of conflict were quietly sown, setting Maple Grove on a path it could not yet see. The story unfolds in the sprawling world of Illoria, a land of fractured kingdoms and ancient magic. Illoria's landscapes are as diverse as its history, ranging from the mist-shrouded forests of Eldenwood to the sun-scorched deserts of Kael'thara. Towering mountains divide the land, while forgotten ruins from a bygone era lie scattered, whispering tales of a civilization that vanished centuries ago. The skies above are often painted with streaks of auroras, remnants of a magical cataclysm that reshaped the world. The people of Illoria live in uneasy harmony, their lives dictated by the ebb and flow of magic, which is both a blessing and a curse. The central figure is Kalen Dren, a disillusioned former knight who abandoned his post after witnessing the corruption of the kingdom he once served. Haunted by his past, Kalen roams the wilderness, seeking redemption but finding only solitude. His rugged demeanor and scarred armor tell the story of a man who has seen too much but speaks too little. Kalen's journey takes a turn when he encounters Lyra Vane, a young mage with a mysterious lineage. Lyra is fiercely independent, her fiery red hair and sharp wit masking her insecurities. She is on a quest to uncover the truth about her family, whose connection to the ancient ruins has made her a target for those seeking forbidden power. Joining them is Theros, a cunning thief with a heart of gold, though he'd never admit it. Theros is driven by loyalty to his younger sister, who remains trapped in the clutches of a ruthless crime lord. His quick tongue and nimble fingers make him both an asset and a liability. As the trio's paths intertwine, their clashing personalities lead to moments of tension, humor, and unexpected camaraderie. Together, they must navigate Illoria's treacherous landscapes, facing not only external threats but also the ghosts of their own pasts, as they uncover a secret that could reshape their world forever. The piercing wail of the siren shattered the festive air, freezing smiles mid-laughter as Officer Chen stepped out of her patrol car, confusion etched across her face. Patricia watched from her window, satisfaction mingling with unease, unaware her call had ignited a chain of revelations: Zoe's hidden struggle, Miguel's secret project, and the Johnsons' buried family rift, all poised to unravel Maple Grove's fragile harmony. The small coastal town of Windmere thrives on its fishing industry, but whispers of dwindling catches have begun to spread unease among its residents. At the heart of the story is Elena, a fiercely independent marine biologist determined to uncover the cause of the decline. Her goal is clear: to protect the fragile ecosystem and ensure the town's survival. Meanwhile, Caleb, a pragmatic fisherman and single father, is focused on keeping his family afloat, skeptical of Elena's scientific approach. Their paths cross when the mayor recruits Elena to investigate, much to Caleb's annoyance, as he fears her findings could lead to restrictive regulations. Elena's initial investigation reveals alarming signs of pollution in the water, but her efforts to collect more evidence are hindered by the town's deep-rooted mistrust of outsiders. Caleb, representing the fishermen's concerns, becomes an unexpected obstacle, challenging her findings at every turn. Despite their clashing perspectives, they are forced to work together when a storm damages a key research station, leaving Elena reliant on Caleb's boat and expertise to continue her work. This uneasy partnership begins to reveal layers of complexity in their characters, as Caleb's protective nature and Elena's determination spark mutual respect. As they spend more time together, Elena learns of Caleb's struggles to raise his young daughter, Lily, while keeping his family business afloat. Lily, curious and precocious, bonds with Elena, creating a tender subplot that softens Caleb's resistance. Meanwhile, Elena's past failures in advocating for environmental causes resurface, fueling her urgency to succeed in Windmere. These personal stakes deepen the tension between their goals, as both realize they are fighting for the same future but from opposing angles. Complicating matters further, a powerful corporation with ties to the pollution emerges, threatening to silence Elena's research. As the town faces mounting pressure, alliances begin to shift, forcing Elena and Caleb to confront their differences and find common ground before it's too late. The morning began like any other in the sleepy coastal town, with the hum of fishing boats and the faint scent of salt in the air. For Elena, a marine biologist conducting a routine survey of the bay, it was just another day cataloging the dwindling fish populations. But as her boat drifted closer to the shoreline, something caught her eye: a massive, rusted container half buried in the sand, its surface marked with strange, unrecognizable symbols. The container wasn't on any shipping manifest, and its sudden appearance was as puzzling as it was ominous. Curiosity turned to unease when Elena noticed the container's lock was broken, its heavy doors slightly ajar. Against her better judgment, she peered inside, expecting discarded machinery or forgotten cargo. Instead, she found a strange, pulsating device emitting a faint, rhythmic hum. The air around it felt charged, almost electric, and the sand beneath it seemed scorched. Before she could investigate further, a sharp, metallic clang echoed behind her. She spun around to see a figure in a dark, weathered coat disappearing into the nearby dunes. Elena's discovery quickly spiraled into something far beyond her expertise. That evening, the town's power grid failed without warning, plunging the area into darkness. The mayor dismissed it as a technical glitch, but Elena couldn't shake the feeling it was connected to the container. Her suspicions deepened when she overheard a cryptic conversation between two strangers at the dock, their hushed tones laced with urgency. They mentioned the signal and a countdown, words that sent a chill down her spine. As the days passed, the once quiet town became a hub of inexplicable events, strange lights over the ocean, dead fish washing ashore in droves, and an unmarked van parked ominously near the beach. Driven by fear and a growing sense of responsibility, Elena realized she couldn't ignore what she'd found. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just her town at stake, it was something far bigger. The sirens grew louder, their piercing wails slicing through the festive atmosphere like a jagged knife. Zoe's laughter faltered, her gaze shifting toward the street. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, the warmth of the celebration momentarily chilled by the unexpected intrusion. Tanya placed a reassuring hand on Zoe's shoulder, her smile tight but unwavering, while Michael moved toward the front yard, his brow furrowed in concern. At the same time, Officer Sarachin, still in her driveway, stiffened as the radio on her belt crackled to life. The dispatcher's voice relayed a noise complaint on Sycamore Lane, the address unmistakably matching the Johnsons' home. Sarah sighed, her earlier smile fading. She glanced at the lively gathering down the street, her instincts telling her this was more than just a routine call. Her exhaustion gave way to a sense of duty as she climbed back into her patrol car, her mind already piecing together the dynamics at play. Meanwhile, Miguel Rodriguez, standing near the dessert table, noticed the shift in the crowd's mood. His father, Carlos, exchanged a quick look with him, their unspoken understanding honed by years of navigating similar situations. Miguel's internship at the police department had taught him that such calls often carried unspoken biases. He tightened his grip on the gift he had brought for Zoe, his jaw set with quiet determination. Inside her dimly lit living room, Patricia Whitman watched the scene unfold with a mix of satisfaction and unease. She hadn't expected the police to respond so quickly. Her fingers trembled as she adjusted the curtains, her gaze darting between the approaching patrol car and the Johnsons' yard. A flicker of doubt crossed her mind, but she quickly dismissed it, convincing herself that she was simply preserving the neighborhood's peace. As Sarah's car pulled up to the curb, the Rodriguez family subtly positioned themselves near the Johnsons, a silent but powerful gesture of solidarity. The partygoers fell into a tense hush, their earlier joy replaced with a collective apprehension. Zoe stood rooted in place, the golden key on her lapel catching the last rays of sunlight, a quiet reminder of her hard-earned achievements. From the edge of the crowd, Elena Rodriguez stepped forward, her voice steady but firm. "Officer, is there a problem?" Sarah met her gaze, her own expression unreadable as she assessed the scene. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, the complexities of her role as both a protector and a member of this community suddenly magnified. As the evening air grew heavier, the stage was set for a confrontation that would ripple far beyond the confines of Sycamore Lane. Hidden tensions simmered just beneath the surface, waiting for the slightest spark to ignite them. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, a quiet hope lingered, that the bonds of humanity and understanding might prevail over fear and division. The wail of the siren grew louder, slicing through the jubilant atmosphere like a blade. Zoe froze mid-laugh, her hands still clutching the knife that had just cut into her cake. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, the festive mood dampened by the unmistakable sound of approaching authority. Tanya instinctively moved closer to her daughter, her expression shifting from joy to concern. Michael, sensing the unease, stepped toward the driveway, his confident demeanor faltering as questions swirled in his mind. Across the street, Patricia stood rigid by her window, her phone still in hand. She watched as the patrol car slowed to a stop in front of the Johnson home. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, but she quickly dismissed it, convincing herself she had done the right thing. After all, she reasoned, It wasn't about race or culture, it was about order, about preserving the peace she believed was slipping away. Yet, deep down, an unease began to gnaw at her resolve. Officer Sarah Chin stepped out of her car, her expression neutral but her posture weary. She had hoped for a quiet evening, but now she found herself walking into a situation that felt heavier than it should. As she approached, Miguel Rodriguez noticed her and hesitated. His experience at the police department had taught him how quickly situations could escalate, and he debated whether to intervene or stay back. His parents, sensing his tension, exchanged a worried glance but said nothing. Meanwhile, Zoe's friends huddled closer, their chatter subdued. One of them whispered, "Why are the cops here?" The question hung in the air, unspoken but felt by everyone. Michael greeted Officer Chin with a polite but guarded tone, his years in medicine teaching him how to mask fear with professionalism. Tanya stood behind him, her arms crossed protectively over her chest, her writer's mind already crafting a narrative she hoped would never need to be written. As Sarah surveyed the scene, her gaze softened. This wasn't the raucous disturbance Patricia had described. It was a family celebrating their daughter's success, a moment that should have been free of suspicion. Yet, the weight of her badge and the expectations of her role pressed down on her. She cleared her throat, addressing Michael. "We received a noise complaint. Is everything under control here?" Her words were measured, but the underlying tension was palpable. Before Michael could respond, Miguel stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. "Officer Chin, I interned with your department this summer. I know this family. There's no issue here." His interjection caught everyone off guard, including Patricia, who watched from her window with wide eyes. Sarah studied Miguel for a moment, recognizing him and recalling his dedication during his internship. Her stance relaxed slightly, but the atmosphere remained taut, the weight of unspoken truths hanging in the air. Back inside her home, Patricia felt a pang of something she couldn't quite name, guilt, perhaps, or the first stirrings of doubt. As the party guests began to regroup, their laughter quieter but resilient, the seeds of a deeper conflict had been sown. The events of the evening would not be forgotten, and the ripples of Patricia's actions would soon extend far beyond the cul-de-sac, forcing Maple Grove to confront the fractures beneath its pristine surface. The sirens grew louder, slicing through the festive atmosphere like an unwelcome intruder. Tanya paused mid-conversation, her smile faltering as unease rippled through the crowd. Zoe, still holding the cake knife, exchanged a worried glance with Miguel, whose grip on his gift tightened. The once celebratory air now felt heavy with an unspoken question: why were the police coming? Patricia watched from her window, her heart pounding in a confusing mix of vindication and dread. She told herself she had done the right thing, protecting the neighborhood from potential chaos. Yet, as the patrol car pulled up, her fingers trembled against the curtain. She hadn't anticipated feeling this unsettled. Officer Sarah Chin stepped out of the vehicle, her expression neutral but her eyes scanning the scene with practiced precision. She recognized the Johnsons immediately, her mind flashing back to Zoe's bright smile at a recent community event. This wasn't what she had expected when dispatch radioed a disturbance call. Her gaze shifted to Patricia's house, where the curtain twitched. A sinking feeling settled in her chest. Michael approached Officer Chin, his movements calm but deliberate. "Good evening, officer," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Is there a problem?" Tanya joined him, her hand lightly brushing his arm in silent solidarity. Behind them, the guests had fallen silent, their earlier laughter replaced by wary curiosity. Patricia stepped outside, clutching her badge like a shield. "I called," she announced, her voice brittle. "There were too many cars, too much noise. It's a disturbance." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, no one spoke. Miguel's mother, Elena, stepped forward, her face a portrait of quiet strength. "This is a celebration," she said firmly. "For our children, for their hard work. That's not a disturbance." The tension thickened as Officer Chen considered her next move. She could feel the weight of the moment, the unspoken histories and prejudices simmering beneath the surface. This wasn't just about a noise complaint, it was about something deeper, something that had been festering in Maple Grove for years. She took a deep breath, knowing her response could either escalate or diffuse the situation. "Let's talk," she said finally, her voice calm but resolute. "All of us." Her words were a lifeline, an invitation to confront the unspoken divides that had quietly shaped their community. As the partygoers and neighbors gathered, the stage was set for a reckoning that would challenge their assumptions and force them to confront the truths they had long avoided. The police siren grew louder, slicing through the jubilant atmosphere like a blade. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, the sound casting a shadow over the celebration. Tanya instinctively moved closer to Zoe, her hand resting protectively on her daughter's shoulder. Michael, ever the calm presence, excused himself from the crowd and stepped toward the front of the house, his expression a mixture of confusion and concern. Patricia watched from her window, her phone still clutched tightly in her hand. She expected swift action, a quick dispersal of what she had deemed an unruly gathering. But as the patrol car rolled into view, her stomach tightened. It wasn't just any officer stepping out, it was Sarah Chen, her neighbor. Patricia's breath caught as she realized her call had brought someone who might not share her perspective. Her fingers trembled, and for a fleeting moment, doubt crept into her mind. Officer Chen approached the Johnson home, her professional demeanor masking the fatigue of her long day. She immediately recognized the celebration for what it was, a family milestone, not a disturbance. Michael greeted her with a polite but wary smile, his hand still holding a dish towel. "Evening, officer. Is there a problem?" Before Sarah could respond, Miguel Rodriguez stepped forward, his internship badge still clipped to his belt. "Officer Chen," he said, his tone respectful but firm, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is just a graduation party." Sarah glanced at Miguel, her expression softening. She remembered him well from his time at the precinct, a bright student with a promising future. Her gaze shifted to the gathering behind him, families mingling, children playing, and laughter filling the air. Nothing about it warranted her presence. Patricia's curtains fluttered as she retreated further into the shadows of her home, her face pale. She hadn't anticipated Miguel's involvement or Sarah's measured response. The scene unfolding outside was not the confrontation she had envisioned. Instead, it was something far more complicated, a reflection of a community she no longer fully understood. Sarah turned to Michael and Tanya, her voice calm but firm. "I received a call about a noise complaint," she said, her eyes scanning the scene. "But it seems to me everything is under control here. Just keep the volume reasonable, and enjoy your evening." Relief washed over Michael's face as he nodded. "Thank you, officer. We'll make sure of it." As Sarah walked back to her patrol car, Miguel lingered by the driveway, his jaw set. "This isn't the first time," he muttered to Zoe, who had joined him. "My family's had complaints like this before. It's not about the noise. It never is." Zoe's brow furrowed, her golden key catching the porch light. "Then maybe it's time we stop letting it slide," she replied, her voice steady with quiet determination. Inside her house, Patricia stared at the photograph of her late husband, her mind racing. The evening hadn't unfolded as she'd hoped, and the sight of Miguel and Zoe standing together unsettled her in ways she couldn't articulate. For the first time, she wondered if her actions had been less about protecting the neighborhood and more about protecting something within herself. The night settled back into a rhythm of celebration, but the undercurrent of tension remained. Conversations shifted, alliances began to form, and questions lingered in the air. The Johnsons' party had survived the interruption, but the community of Maple Grove was on the cusp of a reckoning. As the police siren grew louder, Zoe's laughter faltered, her eyes flicking toward the street. Tanya exchanged a worried glance with Michael, her hand instinctively resting on his arm. Around them, the celebration stilled, the once lively hum of conversation replaced by a creeping unease. Miguel, standing near Zoe, clenched his jaw, his grip tightening on the gift he hadn't yet given her. The weight of unspoken fears settled over the gathering, a stark contrast to the joy that had filled the air moments ago. Patricia watched from her window, her chest tightening as she saw the patrol car approach. She hadn't anticipated this level of response, and a flicker of doubt crept into her mind. But as quickly as it arose, she squashed it, justifying her actions with a muttered, "It's for the good of the neighborhood." The photograph of her late husband seemed to glare back at her, as though questioning her motives. She turned away, unwilling to confront the unease growing in her chest. Officer Chin stepped out of her car, her expression professional but tinged with confusion. She had just left the street, and nothing about the Johnsons' party had seemed out of place. Yet the call she'd received was laced with urgency, describing suspicious activity and potential disturbances. She approached the gathering cautiously, her presence immediately drawing every eye. Zoe's friends huddled closer to her, their excitement now replaced by quiet apprehension. Tanya moved protectively toward her daughter, her voice calm but firm as she greeted the officer. Miguel stepped forward, his recent internship giving him a unique understanding of the situation. "Officer Chin," he began, his voice steady but resolute, "this is a celebration, nothing more." His words carried weight, not just because of his calm demeanor but because of the trust he had built with the department during his outreach work. Chin hesitated, her gaze shifting between Miguel and the Johnsons. The tension in the air was palpable, a fragile thread that could snap at any moment. Inside her home, Patricia's resolve began to waver as she observed the scene unfolding. She hadn't expected Miguel to step in or for the officer to hesitate. The sight of neighbors rallying together, their unity unbroken despite the interruption, stirred something unfamiliar within her, a flicker of shame, perhaps, or the first glimmer of understanding. Her hand hovered over the phone again, tempted to call and retract her complaint, but pride held her back. As the conversation between Officer Chin and the Johnsons continued, the gathered neighbors began to murmur, their voices rising in quiet solidarity. Elena and Carlos stood beside Tanya, their presence a silent but powerful statement of support. Zoe, emboldened by the strength of those around her, stepped forward and addressed the officer directly. "This is my celebration," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "I've worked hard for this moment, and I won't let it be taken away." The officer's expression softened, the sincerity in Zoe's words cutting through the tension. She nodded slowly, her professional demeanor giving way to a more personal understanding of the situation. "Enjoy your evening," she said finally, her voice carrying a note of apology. As she turned to leave, the gathered crowd erupted in cheers, their unity now stronger than ever. Patricia, watching from her window, felt the weight of her actions settle heavily on her shoulders. For the first time, she questioned whether her self-proclaimed guardianship of the neighborhood had done more harm than good. The celebration resumed, though the earlier joy was now tinged with a deeper sense of purpose. The Johnsons, the Rodriguezes, and the rest of the community stood together, their bonds strengthened by the evening's events. And as the party lights continued to twinkle against the night sky, the true heart of Maple Grove began to emerge, not in its manicured lawns or quiet streets, but in the resilience and unity of its people. The sirens grew louder, cutting through the jubilant atmosphere like a blade. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, the celebration faltering as two patrol cars pulled into the cul-de-sac. Officer Sarachin stepped out, her expression professional but tinged with unease. She immediately recognized the gathering as harmless, but protocol demanded she investigate the reported disturbance. Patricia Whitman, standing rigidly on her porch, watched with a mix of satisfaction and apprehension. Michael Johnson approached Officer Chin, his calm demeanor masking his frustration. "Is there a problem, officer?" Before she could respond, Miguel Rodriguez stepped forward, his internship badge visible on his belt. "Officer Chen," he said respectfully, "I interned with the department this summer. I know the protocols, and there's nothing here that warrants concern." Patricia's voice rang out from across the street. "This is a quiet neighborhood. We have rules." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Tanya Johnson, standing beside her daughter, spoke firmly but without anger. "Mrs. Whitman, this isn't about rules. It's about fear of what you don't understand. This community is changing, and that's not something to fear, it's something to embrace." The tension broke when Zoe stepped forward, her golden key catching the light. "Whitman," she said softly, "you've watched me grow up. This party isn't just for me, it's for everyone who believed in me, who supported me. That includes you, if you're willing." Patricia faltered, her gaze dropping to the photograph of her late husband she clutched in her hand. Memories of his belief in fairness and justice resurfaced, clashing with her own actions. Slowly, she stepped off her porch, her voice trembling. I didn't mean for this to go so far." Officer Chin addressed the crowd, her voice carrying authority and reassurance. "There's no issue here. Let's all remember what community truly means." As the patrol cars departed, Michael raised his glass once more. "To growth, understanding, and a brighter future for all of us." The crowd erupted in cheers, the celebration resuming with renewed purpose. Patricia lingered on the edge, hesitant but watching. Change had begun, and the neighborhood of Maple Grove would never be the same. Let this moment remind us, unity starts with a single step forward. As the weeks unfolded after that fateful evening, Maple Grove found itself grappling with the aftermath of Patricia Whitman's impulsive call. The arrival of Officer Chin, who quickly diffused the situation with calm professionalism, had been a pivotal moment. Miguel Rodriguez's knowledge of police-community relations added a layer of understanding that helped de-escalate tensions before they could spiral. Yet, the incident left a mark on the neighborhood, one that could not be ignored. Patricia, once the self-appointed guardian of Sycamore Lane, found herself at the center of a storm of scrutiny. Conversations that had long been whispered behind closed doors now spilled out into the open. Neighbors who had once tolerated her overbearing ways began to question the biases that had fueled her actions. For Patricia, it was a humbling journey. Encouraged by Zoe, who extended an olive branch despite the hurt caused, Patricia reluctantly attended a community forum on implicit bias. It was there, surrounded by the very people she had once viewed with suspicion, that she began to confront the fears and prejudices that had shaped her worldview. The Johnsons, meanwhile, became unexpected leaders in fostering dialogue and unity. Tanya, with her gift for storytelling, penned a heartfelt op-ed that resonated far beyond Maple Grove, sparking discussions about the importance of empathy and understanding in diverse communities. Michael organized a neighborhood barbecue, inviting everyone, including Patricia, to come together in a spirit of reconciliation. Zoe and Miguel, inspired by the events, collaborated on a project aimed at promoting inclusion in their school district, a legacy that would outlive their high school years. As summer gave way to autumn, Maple Grove began to heal. The cul-de-sac, once a symbol of division, transformed into a gathering place where neighbors shared stories, meals, and laughter. The golden key on Zoe's lapel became a metaphor for the doors that could open when people chose connection over conflict. Let this story remind us all, change begins with courage, the courage to listen, to grow, and to extend kindness even when it's hard. Maple Grove's journey isn't unique, but it's a testament to what's possible when a community chooses unity over fear. What steps will you take to build bridges where walls once stood? The future depends on it.